Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
Pint Glass Football. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. What's up, PGF Nation? College football is less than 100 days away. Today, we'll discuss the top 5 college football storylines for 2024, including Deion Sanders' year 2 at Colorado, year 1 without Nick Saban in Alabama, the expanded playoffs, and more. But joining me, like always, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
NFL draft in the books, our NFL reviews of the offseason in the books. Now it's time to talk about next year's crop. Let's get to it about college football 24.
Absolutely, man. College football has been on fire the last couple of years. If you look at the TV ratings, the popularity of the sport has never been higher. Big-time TV contracts, and of course, we've seen some realignment, a lot to get to, and a lot of great storylines. Let's start with year 2, Deion Sanders at Colorado. This is a team, Alex, they went 4-8 last year, but this was probably the most talked about 4-win team in the history of college football. But the hype is still going big time for this season. They've already sold out their season tickets for this year.
If you're a Colorado fan, or if you're in the area and you just want to see what's going on, this could be Prime's last year. We're also aware of this is going to be Travis Hunter, Shiloh, and Shador's last year as well. So there's a lot riding on the season. They're in a new division. There are expectations of offensive explosions. They've redone that entire offensive line. So this is looking up, at least from that standpoint. But I think there's some roadblocks in the way that we need to talk about.
Yeah, Alex, and I understand the hype because this was a really bad program. He flipped this roster, had a bunch of transfer portal guys come in last year, a lot of talent, including, like you mentioned, of course, his son, Shador Sanders at quarterback, the former number 1 overall recruit in the country, Travis Hunter, transferred when he left Jackson State to come play with him again at Colorado, a receiver, a defensive back, a kick returner. I mean, you want to talk about an unbelievable athlete. I think both of those guys are going to be in the mix as top 10 draft picks next year. So that's going to be interesting to watch. Of course, like you mentioned, Shiloh Sanders, he's going to return as a safety. He had a really nice year too, and he doesn't get talked about as much. 54 tackles, 4 forced fumbles. He had an interception. So he had a pretty productive year. They had a big transfer portal exodus this offseason, but I don't know how big of an issue it's going to be because they're bringing in a lot of new talent into this program. So once again, we're seeing a lot of changes on the roster in year 2. This year, they're playing in what I would consider a much softer Big 12. The Pac-12 was loaded last year. It was a tough stretch of games. They were competitive in a lot of those games, but still ended up missing bowl season. I think this year, Alex, they double that win total and they shock some people.
Biggest questions I have around this team are really the skill positions. Now we know Travis Hunter. Well, actually, we don't know. I don't know how much, or they're going to define what he is this season, or is he going to continue to be listed as just simply an athlete? But I'm not sure too much about what really one of the things I saw from last year that I thought they should have improved on was really trying to go and find a tight end so they don't have to have this explosive offense downfield. Trust and believe, I understand that the Big 12 does not have a lot of defense, but in terms of maturation of Shador Sanders, I thought they would have done a lot better with finding a key tight end for this offense.
Yeah, Shador Sanders is a guy I'm really interested to watch this year because I thought he had a chance to be one of the top quarterbacks in last year's draft, decided to come back to school. Obviously, we know last year, or last April, I should say, we had a loaded quarterback class. I think this season he has a chance to maybe be in the mix as the top quarterback off the board. I like the poise. I like the pocket awareness. I like the accuracy, the mechanics. He is going to be a guy that I am going to be watching this year very closely. And like you said, with that revamped offensive line, he'll be under a lot less pressure, I think, this year. And that could really showcase his talents because last year he was running for his life. It felt like on every drop back. Big time hype, big time season for Colorado in Deion year 2.
And as I mentioned earlier, with this being Deion's kids and Travis Hunter's last year, I think there's something that is going to be going on in South Florida, in Gainesville specifically, with the University of Florida, and them possibly getting rid of their coach, where Cormani McLean has transferred to, and Deion, who I believe, as many do as well, will be leaving Colorado for an SEC team. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Not only that, but Deion comes out and says all the things that Colorado fans want to hear about. I love Colorado and I'm not going anywhere, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, right. I don't buy it. I'm with you. I think this was always going to be a springboard job to a bigger opportunity. And like you said, with his kids moving on, this makes the perfect time for him to jump into one of the biggest programs, one of the biggest conferences, if not the biggest, of course, in all of college football, to really highlight what he can do at another level. So fascinating story and a fascinating kind of twist to this whole Deion saga. Michigan, Ohio State, arguably the biggest rivalry in all of college football. Michigan, we know they have swung the table the last 3 years, beating Ohio State. They're the defending national champs, of course, but they're going to look a little different in 2024. We know that Sharon Moore is going to replace Jim Harbaugh. He was on their staff last year, so you get a little bit of that continuity, but they lost a lot of key players to the NFL. Can they keep this run going?
You know what's funny, Brad? I actually think they have an opportunity to, because Jim Harbaugh left this team in really good hands, and he left a roster that's still together, especially defensive tackle Mason Graham, who we both believe will be a top 5 pick next year. Obviously, Donovan Edwards still on this team. I still think that they can do some damage to specifically Ohio State. Because I know if you're a Michigan fan, you do expect some sort of tail off from what you've been striving to for all these years with Jim Harbaugh. So perhaps there's a small step back. But if they can go and beat Ohio State, I think you can call this season a success, provided they don't fall off a cliff.
Yeah, I think it puts a ton of extra pressure on Ohio State and Coach Ryan Day, because Ohio State fans are not happy about the lack of recent success against Michigan. And with Harbaugh gone, I don't think there's any excuses for them right now, especially with this roster, Alex. Emeka Egbuka, arguably the best wide receiver in college football. Running back Travion Henderson has been outstanding. Defensive ends, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuamalo, cornerback Denzel Burke. And they also added in the transfer portal quarterback Will Howard. I think that's going to be an upgrade at the most important position. Running back Quinshon Judkins and defensive back Caleb Downs. It is starting to feel like a now or never season for Ohio State and Ryan Day. And look, Ryan Day has been a really successful coach, but the bar is higher at a program like this.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Brad. Ohio State, I mean, Ryan Day, this is your job, because I cannot see, if you do not do well this year and be at the top of the Big Ten, I'm not sure how he's able to hold on to his job. And you know what? Not even be at the top of the Big Ten, but be at the top of the Big Ten and beat Michigan, because there is a lot of expectation. Michigan gets to play, wild and loose in terms of expectations, but for Ohio State, everyone is looking at them not just to be a playoff team, which we'll talk about later, but to all be at the top of that totem pole of playoff teams.
Alabama, post Nick Saban, the greatest college football coach of all time, hands down the greatest of this era. That's not even debatable. He's retired and gone. And this is a historic program with an historic coach with an incredible amount of success these last several years since he's been there. Now Kalen DeBoer comes over as the new coach at Alabama. He took Washington to a national championship appearance last season. He is a great X's and O's coach, really great offensive-minded coach. But man, he's got some big, big shoes to fill.
Which is the reason I think Alabama did specifically go in this direction. As we know, when you're following college football, most of these coaches, they have some either ties to the school or they have some ties to the South. I think specifically they thought outside the box, and they went outside the box on purpose. This is a coach that has zero ties to the South. He's from San Diego. He coached in Sioux Falls, Southern Illinois, Indiana, Fresno State, Washington, and now Alabama. And I think going outside the box can kind of give him a chance. I think this gives him a longer landing strip that he can probably build a team, because Alabama, as we know, when you're moving on, or rather when Nick Saban decides to move on, they knew whoever was going to be taking over, this was going to be a daunting task for them to take on. And I think choosing an under-the-radar coach like this, and what I mean by that is not someone from the South, and I use air quotes as I say that, a lot of the media and across the board, as well as the team and fans, to get to know a guy, as opposed to saying, we know this guy because we've watched him coach here, and here in the South, but he has no ties, so you have to wait, watch, and see.
Not having ties to the South, I think you're right, can have an advantage in its own way. But I also think it's going to be really interesting to see how he recruits at this level in the SEC, where everything we know is just another level of competitiveness. Because this is a guy who's been a great, and I mean great, developer of talent and a great offensive mind, like I mentioned earlier. But his recruiting, specifically at Washington, and the reason I say Washington because that's his only Power 5 job he's had, wasn't nearly up to par with what people are going to expect in Tuscaloosa. So this is the one part of this hire that I look at and say, okay, you're going to play big time college football on maybe the biggest stage in all of college football. Now you've got to step up your recruiting game. They clearly have the resources, the program, the prestige, you name it. They have the ability to help him get there, but now we've got to see it, because this is a team that's not going to be satisfied, or I should say this is a fan base that's not going to be satisfied with 8 wins. They're not going to be satisfied with 9 wins. They're certainly not going to be satisfied with anything short of SEC titles and national titles. The bar is so high at Alabama, but man, it's going to be fun to see the next chapter for the Crimson Tide.
Let me ask you a question before we close out here. When you say the resources, now he'll have more resources than what he had at Washington, but does he have enough resources in the SEC? Because I think those are two different things there.
It's a great point, man. It is a really great point, because let's face it, Kirby Smart over at Georgia has built a monster, and they're not going anywhere. And we've seen the last couple of years, Alabama is starting to slip from that top spot, while Georgia won 2 of the last 3 national titles. Even though Saban did have some success against Kirby, and it was definitely some close games and some battles, we saw the power shift these last few years with Kirby at Georgia specifically. Here's another thing. Texas also moving to the SEC. We know they have as deep of pockets as anyone. So don't get me wrong. Alabama's got unbelievable facilities. They've got money, but I don't know. You're onto something here, Alex. I don't know if they have the monopoly money of some of these other programs. This future for Alabama could be a little tougher than what we're expecting here, and it could get a little rocky these first couple of years for Kalen DeBoer. Did you know that Pint Glass Football is more than just this podcast? We have an exclusive newsletter. Sign up for free at pintglassfootball.com to receive articles and insights delivered straight to your inbox. But wait, there's more. We're excited to announce our brand new YouTube channel. Not only can you listen to our podcast on YouTube, but you'll also find exclusive video content waiting for you. So hit the pause button right now and go subscribe to our newsletter, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube to stay connected with the latest football news and our exclusive content. The official ticketing app of Pint Glass Football is now SeatGeek. I can't recommend them enough, guys. I've been using SeatGeek for years. You want to go to a game this season? SeatGeek is here to take the confusion out of buying tickets, making sure you get the best seats at the best prices. With SeatGeek, you'll never have to worry about overpaying for tickets again. How? They put a 0 to 10 score on each ticket, so you know you're getting a good deal. But here's the real game changer. You can get $20 off your first ticket purchase with the code PGFPOD. That's right, $20 off with code PGFPOD. This season, make every game day epic with SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app and remember to enter the code PGFPOD to grab your $20 discount. Alex, the new Power 2. Forget the Power 5. It's dead. The Power 4 or whatever. We know that's nothing compared to the two top conferences in college football. The two biggest, baddest conferences in college football just got stronger. We finally get to see what it looks like when Texas and Oklahoma play SEC schedules. Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA play Big Ten schedules. I can't wait.
Yep. So all of us who have been waiting for years upon years to see some of these matchups that we wish we could have gotten in, some of the heyday of some of the big time college programs that were out there, we are going to get them. We're going to be able to see them now going forward. This is exciting. I think it's going to be a little tenuous because I think there's going to be a little bit of navigation here in terms of the fan bases and as well as new TV contracts as well, because now I think this is also from a financial standpoint. I'm going in saying I now have on both sides, the Big Ten as well as the SEC, saying I have these new teams now. We need to talk about a renegotiation as well. So I think there's a huge ramifications across the board, not bad ramifications, but there's a lot of things that need to be tended to because there's a lot of tentacles that can change here as they start to navigate these new conferences, specifically just these two.
It's a good point, Alex. And the TV money is really driving college football these last several years because of these big contracts, because of the money it generates. We saw the massive deal that the Big Ten got recently with Fox, CBS, and NBC all partnering on a deal. We've seen the SEC is leaving CBS for a new contract with ESPN and ABC. Huge amounts of money. You are absolutely right. And it's because these games are getting huge ratings for these TV partners. And it's really catapulted the sport to new heights. And all these big matchups are created for TV. Let's face it, going to these games is awesome and seeing them live is great. And I love it as much as the next guy. But these TV dollars, the TV dollars for these games is really what is driving this realignment. But I'm all for it because, like we said a minute ago, these matchups are going to be incredible. We're going to get more big matchups week in and week out in college football, especially from these two conferences. Oregon, Ohio State next year, Georgia, Texas, USC, Michigan, Oklahoma, Alabama. I mean, college football is just about to explode, and this is a huge storyline this year. I think it's great for the sport. I know there's a lot of traditionalists that aren't happy about all the realignment, but look, sign me up. I'm going to be on the couch, and I can't wait to watch these games. Expanded playoffs this year, a 12-team playoff for the first time in college football. We're going to have the 5 highest-ranked conference champions plus the next 7 highest-ranked teams are going to play for the national championship. How this plays out, how the committee is going to decide the rankings, how many at-large teams are going to come from the same conference. This is going to be so fun to watch and to see all these teams get a true shot at a title.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can get rid of the Florida State fans. Unfortunately, their quarterback got hurt on them complaining. We can move away from Georgia fans complaining because they lost that one game to Alabama, one that we picked on this show that was going to happen. But I think you get rid of a lot of the contentious things that happen when you have these committees that are trying to choose the 4 teams from last year, and now you can expand that to 12, and you're going to be hard pressed to truly miss any teams that you thought should have made it as fans, even as the media. So a lot of the barbershop talk is going to go away. Now, of course, people are still complaining and say where they're slotted at, but the whole point is to make the big dance. And once you make the big dance, you can make your noise, because last year, no one was talking about Alabama going as far and getting as close as they could to beating Michigan. Nobody had that thought process whatsoever until the end of the season. So now the field is open. You have restructuring between between the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, and so now everybody's going to have to come together, and there shouldn't be any more complaints.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. This is going to be so much fun, and you're right, because this is going to open the door for a lot of at-large teams. And you mentioned the SEC and Big Ten. How many come from those 2 big power conferences? I think we could be looking at 4 each. I really do, and that's going to make up 8 teams in this field, and I'm okay with it. It's gonna piss some people off. It is, but when we look at this as a whole, you're going to get the conference champions in from the ACC, the Big 12, and so forth. It's also going to open the door for the group of 5. And I think that's really important here too, because every year there's always a team or two that runs the table in a group of 5 conference. And a lot of times historically they get left out. And it's really unfortunate because, look, are they going to win the national title? Probably not, but they deserve a shot. And so those types of teams, the Boise States from back in the day, the UCFs, we saw Cincinnati actually did get their shot in the 14 playoff a few years ago. Those types of teams are going to get their shot here, and I really like that about this 12-team model as well. But the other thing I'm really excited for, Alex, is the first-round games are going to be played in home stadiums. So they're not going to move to the neutral sites until after those first-round games. That is going to be just incredible atmosphere for these games.
Brad, you mentioned it. Alone, if we just take a look at the 2024 draft alone in its entirety, all 7 rounds, the SEC had 59, the Pac-12 had 43, but we know a majority of those teams are now moving and going to the Big Ten, and then the Big Ten themselves have 42. So if you were to actually rearrange everything, you would have the majority of this draft, everything basically coming from the SEC and Big Ten, with, sprinkled in with the ACC, obviously, because they have Florida State, Clemson, and so on and so forth. But we expect further restructure going on and within the next 5 years. So I think, to your point, we're going to see a lot of good football. We're going to see a lot of great talent. And it's going to be exciting for everybody. And one key thing I truly want to talk about, and it's off script and it's off brand, but I think it deserves a mention. EA Sports coming out with College Game Day this year, already releasing the trailer and everybody getting excited. This is also going to add to this excitement because it's going to tie in and pull in some guys, or some kids rather, who may not be paying attention to college football to start paying attention to college football that may have not been before. So I think all of this is going to tie in. I think we're going to watch a boom for college football over the next 3 to 5 years.
Man, it's a great point. That's a really great point because, that game, as we know, it went away. Now with the NIL back, the game is suddenly back. And it's stirring up a lot of buzz online. I've seen a lot of people talking about it on Twitter and other social media. This game's getting a lot of hype, and I think it's definitely drawing a lot of attention to college football. Like you said, maybe from some people that don't pay as much attention to the sport suddenly will be. It's an outstanding point, Alex. If you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. We continue to talk more off-season storylines in NFL and college football next week. But once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.
Zencastr is the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. It provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content, all from one dashboard. Zencastr's post-production process takes the headache out of audio production. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. Coordinating all your guests to record in person is painful and tedious. Easily invite up to 11 participants per recording with one click. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code PGFP and you'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.